This is Chapter 15, Nationalism and Revolution Around the World. Discussion number 5, Nationalism in Japan. If you remember, the Japanese Meiji Restoration in the late 1800s accelerated Japan's expansion of a modern economy and a modern industrial base. So Japan's growing heavy industry, even through World War I and after World War I, created a large expansion of their economy. The expansion that desperately needed to grow its raw materials, to get its raw materials to feed the industrial machine. Remember that Japan is an island, and that's the problem. So while they increased democratic participation, the Japanese zaibatsu, or the business leaders of Japan, controlled the political parties of Japan, controlled the Japanese government, and also said that the Japanese government needed to go get these raw materials to continue to feed the Japanese industrial centers. On top of that, students were taught that their duties were to the emperor, to the state, to the law, and that was the most important thing that they could do. So with Japan's growing heavy industry, the ultra-nationalists of Japan claimed that the Western influence had ruined Japan and that they needed to no longer be dependent on these Western countries for their identity, and that their military should go get the raw materials they needed for themselves. So they invaded China. Remember, we talked about that in the previous discussion. And they took Manchuria, an area of northern China rich in raw materials, lots of iron and other things that these industries really needed. So the Japanese military began to intimidate all of Japan because a lot of these raw materials were going to building the Japanese weapons, to building ships, to building tanks and that sort of thing, which will later be a big part of World War II. Another big part of World War II, as we're starting to see it coming on the horizon here, is that Japan signed the Tripartite Pact, allying themselves with fascist Germany and Italy, is that they had common goal and common purposes, how to dominate the world. Now, the map that I have on this slide, I'll admit, it is of World War II during 1942, and we're not that far in history. But I kind of wanted you to see where these guys are headed, both Italy, Germany, and Japan, as they are going to start essentially making a lot of noise in the world as they start taking control of history as we're leading up to World War II. This concludes discussion number 5, Nationalism in Japan. It also concludes Chapter 15, Nationalism and Revolution Around the World.